Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. Here at the beginning of the show, I'm going to cover some information related to how it all began, as it's called, in the Meyer case. When Billy was a very young boy, he had a profound experience right around 1941. And in 1941, he woke up in the middle of the night. He was about 4 years old, and he was living in Boulak, Switzerland, near an area called, or a little town called Niederflachs. He said he lived on 1253 Niederflachs, a short distance from a town in Boulak. Interesting, this town in Boulak was surrounded by what are called the Eichen, Moser, and Bruder Mountains, as well as wide forests and extensive meadows. So Billy had this very amazing experience. He looked up into the sky, actually crawled out of a lower window in his bedroom. And it happened, he said, on a mild night in May in the year 1941. And he says, if I remember rightly, it was around 3 a.m. in the night of Sunday, May 4th. In any case, this is how it has all been etched into my memory, indeed, because everything which took place at that time was a special experience. So Billy he was dreaming, and he dreamt that he saw his own body asleep in the bed. And he was a little drowsy, but he got up and rose from his bed and went to the window, climbed out. And it was almost at ground level, and he sat down on a simple bench which stood against the wall of his house that his father had built. And he looked up at the moon. He could not see the moon, but he looked up at the sky. He said it was wrapped in velvety black, and millions of stars shone down from the firmament. He said here, for a few minutes I sat there like that and looked up to the stars while pondering, and in my thoughts flying far into the universe. However, suddenly something peculiar happened inside of me. Billy heard his own voice say, my life is made out of the love of creation. And he could not explain why he said that, and which power led him to speak these words. And he felt this little shiver come through his body, even though he wasn't cold and he wasn't frightened. And again looked up to the stars, and he recognized that the stars were distant suns in the vast outer space, and that they shone by the means of their own power, but that they were created by the light of the love of creation, as everything in the universe. Let me stop there. Created from the light of the love of creation. Because that same kind of phrase is repeated in Love Letter number 27, page 296. It says, no life is able to exist without love and without the light of truth. However, no light is able to exist without love and truth. And no truth is able to exist without light and love. So there are these three things, I guess, in order to have life, in order to have existence, you have to have love and light. And you cannot have light without love and truth. And you can have no truth without light and love. So there's some kind of principle here of interdependence on these three factors. It says true love is true being, and it is the everlasting warmth from the center of creation. So I've never known if this particular passage is referring to a literal love coming from the center of creation. And I kind of tend towards that concept. And it says here, which is described as true existence. So I think what the first couple lines here are trying to describe is what true existence is. So that you can't exist without love and without light and without truth. You can't have any light without love and truth. And no truth without light and love. And there is this warmth that's just called warmth coming from the center of creation. I think at the center of our universe is really what's called the Zohar, or what's left over from the Zohar, or what some people call the Big Bang. So, and then the next passage is one of my favorite when it talks about love, and we're going to talk about. I'm kind of in the intro here and have moved on to the love of creation, but I want to get back also to the attack on Syria and how the negative and the positive play together, because we're seeing this kind of dramatically demonstrated in current political aspects, which seems very far away from the love of creation in many ways. But I've had some dramatic experiences, and I continually have the dramatic experience of the negative and the positive existing together. And you can see it in many ways. So let's keep that in mind, though, while I'm looking at some of this. Love is the highest principle of creation, and through it everything exists in absolute logic. So there is a logic in creation, and sometimes this logic is disturbing to us because we have the predator-prey relationship where, for example, the cat eats the mouse or the chipmunk. I saw that today with my own cats. It's always a negative and positive thing because I think of the fact that I saved 2 cats, which was a positive, had kittens, which I saw as a negative, and then you get when they grow up to be beautiful cats, or they were beautiful kittens too, so that's a positive, but then they kill animals, which is a negative. So you see this negative and positive, and that's part of the logic of creation, that there's a negative and a positive with everything. And in the same way, there's an absolute logic to creation. So when you see the predator kill the prey, it's kind of gruesome because I think humanity is ultimately destined to rise above the predator-prey relationship in our understanding. And that's why we're the highest form of life on the planet. But when we don't rise above that, we have these wars and things like the attack on Syria. So we are kind of required through compassion, empathy, and moral reasoning to rise above the predator-prey relationship and to function on love. See, animals function on love, but they never rise above the predator-prey relationship. I mean, it's hardwired into them. So eventually, humanity will learn the law of love, which is live and help live, which is a little bit different than the predator-prey relationship. So you have to understand also that creation, although it's vastly beyond us, is not perfect yet. This is the first level of creation. And it takes trillions, hundreds of trillions of years, for even much longer than that, for creation to go through all of its cycles. I think one creation cycle is 315 trillion years. But love is the highest principle of creation, and through it everything exists in absolute logic. So the soil supports the trees, and trees allow birds and animals to live, and the plants and the animals allow humans to live. So there's this interdependence, and there's this absolute logic. And it goes on to say the love of creation is everywhere, because without it, nothing at all would be able to exist. So because of this strange superintelligence, which has no personality, but radiates love without a personality, which is not a Heavenly Father, but its love, which is kind of impersonal in a way, without it, nothing at all would be able to exist. And again, this is Love Letter 27. It says, the individual should therefore be aware that he only exists through the love of creation, and he carries this love within himself. Creation created everything in love and logic and put that same love in all of its creatures so that life itself is love. This is the true perspective we're supposed to have. And if you have this perspective, you'll be neutral positive. You'll accept the negative and the positive. You'll be in balance, and you'll have a happiness, and you will naturally strive to improve yourself. But the next thing is interesting. It says, even if living in this world often seems to consist only of conflict and drudgery, this fact does not change. And then it goes on to tell us why life becomes a heavy and tough battle for people. And we're going to talk about the attack on Syria today. So on this earth, which I sometimes call the planet of unnecessary death, life has become a heavy and tough battle. And this is only because people have turned away from the love of creation. In fact, they've lost the knowledge of its existence. And what's been separated or substituted for the knowledge of creation, the knowledge of the universal consciousness, is this religious notion of a God, of a fatherly figure that resides over us. And Islam has the same father figure as Christianity, so does also Judaism. And those three, and in a way, the Luciferian religions do as well. They just think of their father as the devil or Lucifer. So all of these religious groups are at war on the earth, which is very spooky if you think about it. And they're all struggling for dominance. And if you look at the global elite, they have this Luciferian philosophy that what they're trying to do is slowly take over the world and bring in this tyranny, this new world order. And that's part of the activity that's going on in Syria. And they do it through these strange deceptions where they pretend to take the moral high ground. In other words, they're telling us the story line that's being pushed out is that all these children were gassed to death by Assad, who is the leader of Syria. The guy is an optometrist. That's what he studied. That's his profession. He's just a doctor. He's an eye doctor. Goodness sakes. And our military-industrial complex and our deep state and our press paint him as being this monster, and he's not. But they want him out of there because they want to bring in the New World Order, and they need some puppet that's going to do what the New World Order wants. And this optometrist is not cooperating. He's got Russia in there. Russia and Syria are getting rid of ISIS. And that's a problem because the New World Order wants to use ISIS as its proxy army. So anyway, that is the weird, strange political situation that's going on today. And life, as it says here, has become a heavy battle, primarily a heavy and tough battle, because people have turned away from the love of creation, and they've lost knowledge of its existence. So people don't even know they worship what they call a god, and we'll talk more about that. It says, in undiminished size, however, creation lets its love become apparent, nevertheless, through its creations. So you can look at the creations of the universal consciousness, whether it's a chipmunk or a beautiful cat which kills the chipmunk. It's a strange irony that exists through the beautiful trees in the forest, which are being destroyed by mankind as we spread all over the earth in our overpopulation, and that's a terrible irony. To every aspect of creation radiates beauty and love. So creation lets its love become apparent through its creations. The person must only be willing to see and recognize this love, and he will begin to feel it. So if you do enough observation, you have to be willing to see and recognize this love, and you will begin to feel it. If he opens to the love of creation and allows it to flow into himself, he becomes filled with respectful gratitude and great joy. This is one of the most profound teachings of all the Meyer stuff. It's just a small bit here. I think the love teaching is part of the people, for the people who are actually members, which I'm not. I'm kind of still neutral on the outside. It says here, each smallest plant, each ever so tiny animal was created in love by creation. Each creation existing according to the same law of love. All life is in the absolute perfection that it should be in through the love of creation. And except for humans, every life form lives exactly to the creation's plan. So the cat that kills the chipmunk or the bird or the mouse is still living through creation's plan. We, humanity, have turned away from love. Now, and we must learn again what true love is. And the infinite love of creation connects all life, because in all life, this love lies hidden. So in every tiny plant and every tiny animal fulfills its purpose in love. And the incredible splendor of nature is the visible expression of the love of creation. It says all of nature in its indescribable splendor is nothing but the love of creation, which is expressed visibly. So creation is not a heavenly Father. It's not going to save you. If you jump off the building, the laws of cause and effect will kick in. In fact, a heavenly Father will violate the free will of its child in order to save it. And I hear a lot of religions say, oh, well, our heavenly Father cannot violate our free will, blah, blah, blah. Then it's not a heavenly Father. If you look at a father, it will violate the free will of the child or the teenager in order to save them from their own stupidity. if you look at religions through logic enough, you will start to make the discernments to understand the difference here. It says each smallest plant, each ever so tiny animal was created in love by creation. Each creation existing according to the same law of love. All life is in the absolute perfection, which it should be through the love of creation. And except for humans, every life form lives exactly to creation's plan. So our goal is to get back to creation's plan, which is, first of all, learning what effective love is. Love is the high principle in all creation. Learning what effective love is and living according to effective love, not romantic love. Following the law of striving to evolve our consciousness, striving to evolve in all ways. Living according to the law of harmony, which is the law of neutral positive thinking. To think in a neutral positive way, so we bring in positive, healthy experiences in our life. To live and help the plants, the animals, the other people. To live within other creational natural laws, like the laws related to population, which our planet should have no more than 1 billion people, somewhere 500 million to 1 billion. To live within these creational laws gives us the opportunity to live according to creation's plan. Only humans have turned away from love and must now learn again what true love is. The infinite love of creation connects all life, because in all life, this love lies hidden. And it's very, very hidden in the people of the earth right now, which is a very scary thing. And I am going to play some of these clips on the attack that we just did against Syria. And you can listen to the propaganda, and I'll let you figure out what the propaganda is for yourself. Let's listen.
And tonight, while the U.S. and its allies are calling the military action a success, a very different story from Syria, claiming they knocked down many of those missiles out of the sky. And supporters of the Assad regime, you see them there, rallied in Damascus today, denouncing the U.S.-led attack. ABC's James Longman reporting from the region tonight.
The smoldering aftermath of US-led airstrikes, but tonight Syria projecting strength. This video from Bashar al-Assad's Twitter account trying to suggest business as usual for the embattled president. The regime keen for the world to see it has support, celebrations, and claims that 71 coalition rockets were intercepted or shot down. But the US military says that's not true. None of Syria's surface-to-air missiles hit their targets. Key ally Russia angry at the strike. The defense ministry even suggesting upgrading Syria's air defense system. In a Security Council meeting, Russia's UN ambassador repeating their wild claim the chemical attack was faked by foreign intelligence services.
Just as 1 year ago, when the Shara air base in Syria came under attack, the United States used as a pretext a staged chemical attack against civilians.
Adding their inspectors found no traces of toxic agents when they visited the sites, and blocking a UN investigation into who is responsible.
James Long.
President Trump ordering strikes on Syria.
American, British, and French warships and planes launching dozens of missiles targeting the Syrian regime's chemical weapons sites. Video from Syria overnight shows missiles lighting up that night sky, but this morning, Syrian state TV with defiant images of people in the streets, and they are celebrating.
President Trump addressing the nation overnight, calling the Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, quote, an animal. The U.S.-led strikes are in retaliation for a suspected chemical weapons attack Assad carried out against his own people, killing women and children. The video horrifying the world.
If you remember, the strikes, they come just about 1 year after President Trump ordered a first round of strikes after another chemical attack. So will this time be different? And how does the U.S. avoid getting pulled into a bloody 7-year civil war? We're going to have team coverage this morning, but we do begin with ABC's David Muir, anchor of World News Tonight, who's on the ground from Beirut. David, good morning.
Dan and Paula, good morning. As you know, President Trump addressing the nation shortly after 9 p.m. last night, telling Americans that U.S.-led precision airstrikes had begun over Syria with help.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here outside the White House, and the president has canceled his South American trip, and they're saying they have military options on the table to strike 24 targets inside Syria, including some targets where the Russian military is based. The Russians announced 3 weeks ago they're going to pull out. Trump announced 2 weeks ago that we were going to pull out, and it was a successful defeat of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. But a lot of different parties, especially the EU and the globalists, and the former Obama-era people in the White House, and some of the neocons, they want to keep the U.S. there. They want a wider war. McMaster wanted that as well. The Russians have warned this could trigger, in fact will trigger, a huge new world war. Because if the U.S. bombs Russian forces for the second time, we've already had Russian forces killed last year, they're saying they're going to respond militarily to the ships and the aircraft that fire the cruise missiles and drop the bombs. So you've got
Today is April 11th, 2018. I am Jake Morphonios with Blackstone Intelligence. From the Associated Press, U.S. and Russia trade rhetoric edge toward showdown over Syria. When the United States fired Tomahawk cruise missiles at a Syrian airfield a year ago after an alleged chemical weapons attack, the Pentagon gave Moscow advance warning to get its personnel out of harm's way. Since then, U.S.-Russian relations have soured and the two nuclear powers have raised the ante, getting dangerously close to a potential military clash in Syria. U.S. President Donald Trump has taunted Moscow to, quote, get ready for nice and new and smart missiles coming to punish Syria for a purported chemical attack on Saturday that killed at least 40 people. The tweet followed Russia's warning that it will strike at incoming U.S. missiles and their launch platforms. The defiant...
Okay, folks, I know it's a little overwhelming. I'm going to take, if I can find it here, a slight break, and we're going to listen to a little music just for 10 or 15 seconds and then get back on the show. Okay, folks. Well, we are back again in the Meyer Information. One of the things I want to talk about this evening is the importance of the negative and the positive. The negative and the positive are two parts that belong together, and they should never be separated in our minds. And whenever we try to separate the negative from the positive, we go out of control of the good human nature. If you look back in your life, probably those times you've been angry, you've actually tried to get rid of the negative. So we've got a bit of negative that we're dealing with here in the world. So we have to balance it. It has to come back into balance. And in the Might of Thoughts book, Billy has written, as you know, over 50 books. One of these books is called The Might of Thoughts. It teaches us how to control our thoughts. The controlling of our thoughts is eventually what leads to bringing good circumstances into your life. And therefore, let me read just a little bit here on page 246. It says, therefore, not just limited to the human being's psychology and consciousness-based evolution and so forth, just as electrical current demonstrates plus and minus, that is to say a negative and a positive, the entirety of the matters of the life and the universe is also built upon the constantly operating factors of the positive and the negative. So I gave the example of me saving the cats and the cats reproducing, and now we have lots of cats, and now the cats kill animals, and so you've got these beautiful cats, but they kill animals. It's a negative and a positive. If one takes the human being's work as an example of this, then the factors negative and positive can be easily explained. If, among other things, the amount of work the human being manages to achieve is considered, the amount of work achieved is just as positive and creative as it is constructive, because a body of work is completed as a result of which something is creationally constructed or built. But the negative side is that takes a certain amount of energy from you. And as a result of the work done by the body, its strengths are used and they become weaker, while the consciousness-based powers of concentration diminish. So as the harder you work, the longer you work, there's an exactness in your thinking which goes away. So we have these in life, a negative and a positive. And the negative and the positive are two powers which belong together, and they always work together, and they never allow themselves to be separated. We only try to separate them because one is dependent upon the other. If there's some way you can try to separate these two, if you have the audacity to try to separate the negative and the positive, then in the German what comes about is Ausartung. On the one side or another, either you'll go way negative or you'll go way positive. Remember, we talked about how emotions trigger a misdirection of thoughts, which cause us to go from one extreme or the other. It's a very similar kind of thing. As a consequence of this, positive or negative Ausartung therefore arise. Excuse my pronunciation. So we become out of balance. We become way negative and angry, or way positive and kind of lose touch with reality, which eventually makes us very unhappy. So you can either turn towards the negative or the positive if a human being does not use both powers. So we have to somehow accept the negative as it is and then work with it. So don't turn to one or the other. If the human being does not use both powers and only turns towards one of the two factors, then he or she falls badly out of control of the good human nature. And it's really interesting. That's probably what happens with the criminal. He goes way negative. Or, who knows, he goes way positive, and then I don't know what a criminal does when he's way positive. But it's hard to say, but it's very interesting. Then, if he or she falls badly out of control of the good human nature, that is why a neutral, positive, equalized thinking means that both the negative as well as the positive must be included in the thought patterns and must be tended and nurtured. It's very dangerous to tend to nurture negative thoughts. So be careful, because they can run on their own out of control. Okay, by the same token, if an idea arises in the consciousness, an idea, again, is an unripe thought. It isn't completely developed. And you get an idea, it comes up in your consciousness. That means it has both the negative as well as positive factors. And you have to consider the negative and the positive, and must thoroughly consider them for it to eventually evolve into an ideal. But I think we're supposed to get rid of the unvalues. I'll continue that because unvalues, or at least we need to change our perspective on them. Unvalues are the things that lead to the psychopath, the person who becomes the psychopath. I wonder if I could find that. Well, let me pick up here. It says here again that misdirected thoughts trigger emotions. This is in contrast to entangled ideas. Remember, ideas are not completely evolved. They confuse the thoughts, so you get a certain level of confusion in your mind. and you abruptly go from one extreme to another, whereby a misdirection of thoughts arises, which triggers emotions. Remember, the emotions are triggered, and can even lead to murder and manslaughter. So what we have here on page 224, I believe it is, of The Might of Thoughts, is a example of a unhealthy thought pattern, a thought pattern which can lead to murder and manslaughter. It's tangled ideas which confuse the thoughts, and they cause you to go from one extreme to another. The misdirection of thoughts triggers emotions, and emotions, remember, are not feelings. Feelings are good. Feelings are something we need to let grow. They come from the thoughts. Emotions are a thing which causes problems. And what happens when you get into this state, there's no room for rationality in your mind anymore. Boy, if I get that way, there's no rationality in my mind. I just become this, well, we won't even go there. But emotional forms don't allow us to set a zeal, life determination. So the misdirection of thoughts, they trigger emotions. And there's this German word, Auslösen, which has many meanings, by the way, but it can also mean to trigger, to provoke, to elicit, to unleash. And we're at a point now, for example, in the case of our president, Trump, what they did is they triggered his emotions because he saw these films of children that were gassed. Well, it makes no sense logically for Assad to be gassing his own people, especially when he's winning the war. And the Russians have pretty much gotten everything out of Assad's way. But they bring this in, and I'm really surprised that Trump didn't have enough objectivity here. And this is maybe what Billy meant when Billy said months and months ago, years ago, I guess, that he was not qualified. And I didn't know what Billy meant. I really didn't. I thought, well, this guy's a millionaire. He's a smart businessman. Come on, I don't get it. Well, maybe this is now I'm starting to see what it is. So anyway, these pictures, these films of these children being gassed, there probably were children that were gassed by somebody, someplace, or some kind of simulation that they did. But anyway, it triggered emotions in Trump. So he then brings our military in. Well, I want to bring this up because there's a letter. It says Open Letter to Fellow Men, and it's an article that the Figu people have put together. Open Letter to Fellow Men, it says, and it talks about this. It uses this word Auslösen in terms of triggering disasters on a very large scale. And that's what we're at the point of doing, triggering disasters on a very large scale. Let me read a little paragraph, just a random paragraph in here. It says, we humans seek all the time and still don't find what we're looking for, namely real love, delight and calm, freedom, happiness, liberty, and harmony. We sneak a glance onto the horizon and into the sky without truly taking the splendor of the nature or the positive in the environment of one's own. But no one asks the question, why everything is like it is, whereupon we can't find an answer to it, and we don't become aware of it because we have to create ourselves the happiness, the love, and the other high values, and that we also have to implement and carry it by ourselves. Let me continue into the next paragraph a little bit. It says here, if we are unhappy and search for a happiness abroad, so we also carry automatically our unhappiness to the foreign country. Then only by leaving the country, nothing changes in our behavior and our attitude and in our thoughts and feelings to the better and best. Therefore, it is of priority to transform all these factors in better forms and create a new beginning in ourselves. We always have to start with ourselves. One of the things I guess I've learned, through which only it will be possible to open towards true love and harmony, to be peaceful and free inside ourselves. Concerning other countries, there is to mention that every country has also its own problems, which we will be present and also burden us when we emigrate, until they will be solved there, where they occur. So it's this interesting idea that we have to create our happiness internally. And we're all seeking this real love and this real happiness. And it starts with looking inside at our thoughts. If we, and it says here, the knowledge that we ourselves alone are essentially the very own responsible for everything, and that everything finally starts on a small scale with us. Therefore, let us reflect with ourselves about that which we are actually employing at the moment with our planet in a large scale. So now we're practically starting World War II with this attack on Syria. We're also destroying our environment and our climate. We are triggering, auslösen in the German, all of these disasters, the hurricanes, the fires, the tremendous natural disasters. Our misdirected thoughts are triggering disasters on a planetary scale and on a personal scale. Okay, this is Goblet of Truth, one of Billy's books that I haven't been talking about much lately. On page 49 it says, "This means everything is connected, and this interconnectivity is rendered particularly stable because the reward center is triggered by all these aggressions and degeneracies, and the brain is flooded with the neurotransmitter dopamine." So what happens when these military powers fly their planes in, and that's why people gravitate towards the military, because think about it. You fly a fighter jet, and you have all this power at your fingertips, and you drop a 2,000-pound bomb, or you fly 1,000 miles per hour. This causes the neurotransmitter dopamine to be released. And what the Goblet of Truth says here is the human being feels himself or herself big and powerful in his or her aggression. So the military person, the fighter pilot, has this tremendous machine worth $50 million, and he's controlling it, and he's dropping these 2,000-pound bombs, or he's firing this Vulcan cannon with 6 barrels and fires thousands of rounds a minute. It says here, Gewalt and degeneracy, and this is precisely what leads to the situation where he or she becomes addicted to his or her acts of Gewalt, which is, Gewalt is violence worse than violence. It's what's causing all of this insanity. And therefore, people always strive for evil. They unleash disputes, wars, and all-around death and destruction in order to satisfy their own addiction to this neurotransmitter, dopamine. And the dopamine is released during the conflict. I'm guilty of it too. I watch all kinds of violence on YouTube and stuff, and I probably need to get away from that. Now, there are natural ways to release dopamine within you. One way to release dopamine is to exercise. There are certain foods which also help your body to produce dopamine. So our thoughts are affected by our body's release of neurotransmitters. And dopamine is often seen as the main chemical of pleasure. And when a person is addicted to drugs, he's not really addicted to cocaine, for example, because cocaine, only thing that cocaine does is release dopamine, the neurotransmitter in our brain that makes us addicted. So we release too much dopamine when we're on the drug, and then the rest of the time, when we're not on the drugs, our dopamine is low. So we feel terrible when you're not on the drug. So this is what's happened. And it's what keeps pulling people back to doing these acts of Gewalt. To misdirect means to send someone or something to the wrong place or the wrong direction. To trigger means to cause a situation to occur. Contact Report 251 talks about our genetic manipulations, and we have been genetically manipulated here on the planet Earth. It's a long, long story. I don't know that I can cover it in a way that would not take up too much time, but basically the story is a lot of the people here on the Earth are basically everyone now has a genetic defect that was put there intentionally by an off-world group that was in the Sirius system who created kind of an underclass with a shortened lifespan and a heightened aggression, and they were going to be their military, and they were going to fight their wars for them. And they would never do too much damage because they didn't live that long. They only lived 100 years like us or so. And eventually, those people, or a good portion of them, were escaped from this planet because they were all going to be wiped out. And they came to our solar system, and they settled on Mars and Malona. Malona was eventually completely destroyed. Malona was another planet in our solar system that supported life. At one time, our solar system had 3 planets which supported life: Mars, Malona, and Earth. Malona was destroyed when its inhabitants directed an ocean into a volcano, which split the planet up. And this planet, when it was destroyed, part of those fragments slammed into Mars. But that didn't completely destroy Mars. There was also a comet which came through our system, which pulled Mars out of its orbit. So there's been 2 planets destroyed in our solar system. And there's also been massive destruction on our planet that I know of 3 times. One during the civilization of Pelagon, which was 150,000 years ago. The second great destruction occurred 130,000 years ago, which was the time of Atlantis and Lemuria. And then we had a great destruction during the time of the flood here on the Earth. So we've had multiple destructions on the Earth. I'm going to play just a little bit of music again and get back to the show in about 30 seconds. So, welcome back to the show. As you know, we have the negative with the positive. And I don't know if you heard any of that chaos in the background, but that certainly is, we have a little negative with the positive in life. So, we're having to look again at some of the things we've been studying in the might of thoughts. And there's something called a collective mass delusion. We have a collective human subconsciousness, and a lot of false information goes into our what's called the we form here on the earth. The we form is a connected subconscious that we have, and a lot of negative information goes in there, a lot of false information, as well as some good stuff. And we have collective myths, which are part of this we form, and we are influenced by the we form. It's a kind of a public mind in a way, and it's enhanced by the internet. This is probably something you could have a whole program devoted to. But I was talking about the genetic manipulation that we had, and it makes us more have a tendency towards aggression, and we tend to try to solve our problems with aggression, and it's a behavior that we default to. It's very, very interesting. We are not, because of our genetic manipulations, we are not a born killing machine, but we are combative, and we are capable of killing when required to do so. And this combative nature comes out when events trigger our loss of control. When our world of thoughts and feelings are afflicted or overburdened, and they prompt us to act in a certain way during the heat of this passion. We don't have a compulsive inborn lust to murder, but when our thoughts and feelings are overburdened, we tend to strike out. So maybe that's something that happened with Trump. Maybe that's a weak area that he has. I think we all have that weak area, as a matter of fact. So anyway, the importance of the negative and the positive. So knowing that there's always a negative that has to balance our positive. So let me in the remaining few moments here bring something back that comes from Contact Report 238. It says the path of evolution is very long and burdensome, and is marked by many kinds of external influences. In particular, influences of the same kind of forms of life that exert powers over a single form of life, which this form of life is able to control through living through greater spaces of times and teachings. So we only are able to deal with the challenges through this long course of evolution. The course of evolution belongs to the high and the highest of life, as well as it does to the lower forms of life. So there's some aspect. I believe the plants actually have a spirit form. And even though they may only live for the spring and the summer and the fall and die, their spirit form will come back perhaps in the seed. But all the plants and animals evolve. Let me continue with this. Just like there's the negative and the positive, there's the male and the female. Despite the 20 different sexes that they try to define today, but there's really only the male and the female, the negative and the positive. The man and the woman must complement each other at all times in the duties of life. Consequently, they are connected inseparably with each other, and they have a need for each other. One gender cannot exist without the other, because only together, in their difference, do they form the true potential of human existence. Each one itself forming a 100% unity. They are in their union a complete 100% unit, exactly like the poles of electricity, in the negative and the positive, which are in themselves a 100% unity in the negative and the positive, and are able to generate light only in togetherness, and thus form a full unit. So this is Contact Report 238, some very, very, very interesting information. Let me talk a little bit about the positive and the negative imbalance that happens in the psyche. That is degenerated, so we become degenerated at times, either to the negative or to the positive. It's actually almost humorous because we're in a really challenging situation here on the earth sometimes, because we have this genetic manipulation and it's triggering us. We get triggered when our psyche is overburdened. And what we have to reestablish is this balance, which consists of the negative and the positive, each to the same degree. And there's no degeneracy in one area or the other, rather a harmony. So let me talk a little bit about another article. It's called Thoughts and Worries of Yesterday. I believe it's another article that exists out on the Future Mankind site. I'm kind of running low on time here. I've only got about 2 minutes here, so I'll have to just cover this quickly. Our lives are very rich in substance. They are entwined and interwoven with countless negative and positive things. Still, it is within our power to form our experience into things with a neutral positive balance, to cope with them and to live. May we all therefore make the most of each day without fears, apprehensions, pain, grief, worry, doubt, or the like. Instead, may we learn to conquer and master these things so we may feel cheerful and free and able to stay with dignity. In the last minute of our lives, I have lived my life honorably and evolutionary in its fulfillment into a good measure. I have satisfied the duties of the creational natural laws. Well, thanks for listening, folks. I know this is a wild show. Lots of wild stuff going on. You're listening to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. Have a great